4 weeks here at the Bridge is that we've been trying to channel our focus through the birth of Jesus, and we've been looking through a couple of different lenses. The first lens we looked at was hope, and hope being the idea that these prophecies or these predictions that were given by people hundreds of years before Christ was ever born, very specific information, like he would be born of a virgin, the family line or ancestry that he would come from, the actual town he was going to be born in. These were all things, again, that were prophesied or predicted hundreds of years before Jesus was literally born. And then we looked at the idea of peace and how Jesus brought peace between not just all peoples of the earth, and the Bible goes on to say that there's no Jew nor Greek nor slave nor free, that Jesus is really the first person, all about equal rights. And that not only did he bring peace to all peoples of the earth, but most importantly, he brought peace between God and his creation. And then 2 weeks ago, we talked about joy and the fact that while there's a lot of kind of cool things, we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, gadgets and gizmos and tech stuff and toys, and we do Christmas Eve, a tradition that we do at my house, my parents' house, is we open presents on Christmas Eve. And it was because of services like this and the fact that we used to have Christmas morning services, and so we said, well, let's just open these up on Christmas Eve, and I certainly didn't complain about that, and I still don't mind it today. So I've already dug into about 80% of my presents, and so, but we got a lot of neat stuff. Got this new shirt that my mom got me, so that's got me Santa. Santa got me, so compliments of Santa, and we talked to that those things only bring temporary satisfaction and temporary joy, and that the only true joy that lasts is found in Jesus. And then last week we talked about love, and that the reason that we give at all on Christmas, or so the reason that we should be giving is an honor and remembrance of that great gift that God gave 2,000 years ago when he started his plan of reconciliation on the earth through the birth of his son Jesus. And so that was a crash course, Cliff Notes, 30,000-foot view of our series that we've been in and that we wrapped up on Sunday, and this is going to be kind of an encore, if you will, tonight. So we're going to read a couple scriptures together tonight. We're going to be in the book of John, and they'll be up there on the TV screen. It's a little dark, and so it might be hard to pull up your Bibles or pull up your favorite electronic device. And just quick plug for YouVersion. YouVersion is an app you can get on your Droid or your iPhone. If you're like, I don't have a Bible, well, you can not only get a Bible, but you can get like literally 10,000 Bibles on your phone in the size of an app, translated in any language that you'd like, and so it's all completely free, which is really cool. So if you want to look at that, great. If not, then we can read along together here off the screen. But what we want to do tonight really is to peel back the hustle and bustle of this holiday season and all the stress and all the sales, and I know some people are like, you're almost glad to see Christmas come just so you can like put it behind you. You know, it's got such a busyness about it that we want to spend at least one night, if no other night, but we want to spend a night like this focusing on Jesus. And I would just say I'm not surprised. I mean, that's a bad word because it sounds like an expected of you, but I'm really happy with the crowd here tonight. I mean, this is an amazing turnout for a cold Christmas Eve night when everything is working against nights like this. The society says that you should be home, you should be out. I don't know, there's probably some sale in some store going on. It's just like unbelievable to me, but there's probably somewhere that you could be online right now shopping. I don't believe in that. It's a joke. Okay, you had to be here Sunday. But I'm just appreciative, but more than Scott being appreciative, myself being appreciative, I know that God has to be pleased with the group coming together on the eve that we celebrate his gift of reconciliation to the world. And so I'm really kind of flattered on God's behalf, if that makes sense, that you guys have made the choice to come out. But it is Christmas time, and we're going to focus on that little word, Christmas time. You know, Christmas time is here, Christmas time, and this idea of time. I think it was Bob Dylan, maybe. I know Bobby's he's a big fan of. I think you're president of the Bob Dylan fan club, as a matter of fact. But Bob Dylan, I think he said times they are a-changing. Maybe, I don't know. Is that Bob Dylan? You can tell me later. But times they are a-changing, and then why I think that sometimes that's very true. I also think that probably what I believe in is that metaphor, that adage, that old saying of the more things change, you can finish it with me, the more things stay the same. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. So let's take a quick look. So this year, I don't know, again, if maybe you're lucky like me, you've already started to unpack and peel off the wrapping paper, but here's some gifts that are kind of like hot items. So if you get this, you're really cool, and your mom, your Santa really loves you if you get any of these things. So let's look at that, like the Apple iPad Air. So I don't know if anybody's got that yet, or you're like really crossing your fingers, maybe you're drooling out the side of your mouth as we look at that. But the Apple iPad Air, it's a measly $499. And the great thing about this iPad is that it's not like any other iPad. It's like, I don't know, like an eighth of an inch thinner, because that makes a lot of difference. And it's also faster, right? And it also has better battery life. And so if you've got the iPad 1, 2, or 3, just know that it is garbage now. You can use it as a doorstop, because what you need is the iPad Air. And maybe that's a little bit too much, or you haven't been that good on Santa's list, and maybe you got the Pebble smartwatch instead. And so for the Pebble smartwatch, it tells you when you have a phone call, it tells you who's calling on caller ID, right? And you're like, no thanks, right? And then it tells you if you've got text, it tells you if you've got emails. If you're golfing, which is really cool, it'll tell you like how far the hole you are away from the hole, right? Like you should have hit the 9, but you hit the 6 or whatever. I'm way over my depth when I start using golf analogies. So if you hit it and you didn't hit it far enough, then this watch will tell you. And the amazing thing about this watch, for $150, it'll also tell you the time of day, which is amazing, right? So it is amazing. It is amazing. And maybe if you've been like really super, super good this year, you might get the Samsung S9C OLED. That is a TV, and it's not a bad projection we've got, but it actually has a curve to it, right? It's a 55-inch. I don't even know what OLED means, but I know it's really good. But it has a curve to it, and it has a blur-free motion, right, which is important. So it's like 60 hertz, 120 hertz, 240, then like whatever this does is like way above. And I don't know how, I don't even know if I want to know, but if it has these special glasses, like if me and Steph are watching side by side on this, depending on our glasses, we could be watching 2 different shows right at the same time, which is very Jetson kind of like to me. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm like Rosie to come in and clean our house as we're watching this TV. But it's only a mere $8,999. So it's a steal. If it had been $9,000, I would say forget it. But it was $8,999. And so again, that Apple iPad Air, it was $499. I'm sure you could get that on Amazon or BestBuy.com. And it's funny because, as I said, things, the more they change, the more they stay the same. And so 10 years ago, this Christmas 10 years ago, people were still lined up at the Apple store waiting to get the latest creation by Apple for $499. This time, that's not it at all, Rob. But it's the iPod Generation 3. You remember that thing? It had like the wheel. You remember that iPod? It was like white, and it had like green and gray screen, and that's about it. And it had like a wheel you could turn. You're like, some of you are like, I wasn't even born then. But you could turn it, and like, who would ever pay $499 for that? That's beyond me. Nice try, Rob. But this is like, that's a nice one, but the other one is not so nice. But I would imagine you could probably find it on like Craigslist or eBay today for like maybe $50. I don't know. But it was like a 40 gig, $499 device. Also, we had the Sanyo SCP-5300. I don't know if you've got that, Rob, or not. But it was the first it was the first camera cell phone. And it was this gray thing, and it was a Sanyo. I don't know, does Sanyo even make phones? I don't know if they even make anything anymore, but it was this little gray phone, little metallic gray, and you like flipped it up, which is weird, and it had like it was amazing because it was only $400, and get this, it had a 1.3 megapixel camera, right? A 1.3 megapixel. I've got the S4. And I think this has like, I'm not trying to brag, but this has like a 13, right? Like to remove the decimal or take the decimal and push it over. But a 1.3 megapixel camera. It's like the first camera phone. And like today, like Verizon can't give those things away, right? Like literally if you get on Verizon.com and you're shopping for phones, there's like a section where it's like 1 penny. right? Of the phones, like they just cannot give it to anybody. And so that would be one of those. But again, it's funny how technology changes, but everything's kind of priced around that $400 mark. And again, in 10 years from today, something will be priced about $400, and we'll look back at the old iPad Air with its fast processor and its eighth of an inch thinner, and it's so wonderful and amazing, and just kind of laugh about, oh, I remember those days, right? And maybe if you think back to 1997, sometimes it's not even like a like expensive thing, but you remember these? It's kind of like these fads that come and go. Tamagotchi, I think that's what that is. Anybody have? Let's be honest. All right, Little had one. Bobby had one. I was expecting more girls than guys to say that. Okay, we got some over here. The Tamagotchi. And I think what you do with that is that's a pet, right? And you feed it and you take care of it and you like groom it and if you don't take care of it, what happens if you don't feed it? It dies. Okay. And so there's a lot more people said it dies than raised their hand said they had it. I'm not judging. But the Tamagotchi, and so again, these are things like if I give that to Liam today, he's like, what do you want to do with this, right? He's like, he's got like the Wii with the Infinity, the package, I don't even know. You put the what is that, Skylanders, but it's like all the Disney characters now. And so, but again, that'll hold Liam's attention for or Jalen even, for like 10 seconds. And then one last thing, if you remember, this is like the latest, greatest craze. It had 8 bits, right? It was amazing. It had 2 colors, okay, gray and green, but it had 4 shades of gray. So it kind of technically, I guess, had like 7 or 8 colors. And so you could spend like hours. It's a Game Boy. So we're like, what is that fancy machine? That is a 1989 Game Boy. And what it would do is it would play Tetris. And that's, I think, like I had maybe 3 games ever, but all you really needed was Tetris. Am I right? And you could spend hours and hours and hours and hours of your life playing Tetris. And what's that? Yes, that's true. I'm getting heckled. Who gets heckled on Christmas Eve? Security. Until the battery died. That's right. It took 4 batteries, and just to tell you how much things stay the same through the years is I dropped mine in the toilet, and so again, electronic devices tend to do that, and we won't go into that. But the Game Boy, and so that was 89, I think 89, 99. And again today, my cell phone, or any cell phone except for that Sanyo one that we were talking about, like it just totally destroys anything that has to offer. And so the point is that there's always something that we just have to have, right? We just have to have it until we don't have to have it anymore. And the weird thing about humanity, which is also a great thing about humanity, is that we're wired for greatness. Like every one of you, if you're in this room breathing air, you're wired for greatness. Meaning that you want to achieve great things, or sometimes you'll take like a separate path where you don't want to achieve great things, but you want to acquire great things, fancy things, neat things, right? And so this idea of seeking out fulfillment in stuff, we seek out fulfillment in stuff, whether it's the Tamagotchi or the Game Boy or the Samsung 55-inch curved screen, $8,999 TV. And I wonder sometimes if you're like me, when you're like earlier today, there was like a tornado of wrapping paper and tape and boxes and like that tissue paper, which really serves no purpose, right? I mean, it's like the most worthless stuff. It's like I get a bag and I put a toy in it and then I put paper on it. And I want to tell you that my mom, this will embarrass her, but she gave me like a little gift bag and I pulled it. I can't remember what was inside of it, but I was like, Mom, I think these are actual Kleenex. Right? There's actual Kleenex and not the paper tissue. You don't know what I'm talking about, the filler paper, but it's actually Kleenex. And I'm like, wow, okay, all right. Which, by the way, is much nicer. It even actually makes more sense because it's softer, but, whatever. At any rate, but as we're going, there's like a whirlwind of stuff going on, and the kids are like, what's next, the screaming, yelling. And I'm just wondering if you're like me sometimes in those moments, and maybe you've had it, or maybe you'll have it later this evening, or maybe even in the morning probably, but you'll have this like gut feeling at times, not the whole time, but something will just kind of whisper in your ear like, there's more than this, right? There's more than this. There's more than this. And this idea that it's Christmas time, and how times change, but they kind of stay the same. And humanity wired for greatness. Let's look at a scripture together. It's John 1 through 5. And I want to talk about time and maybe kind of connect some dots behind why do we want stuff. And see, because in the beginning, the Word already existed. Now, as we read this passage, the Word is a word that John is using for Jesus. And so we can kind of interchange that. In fact, I will tonight. And so wherever we see Word, I'm going to say Jesus. But in the beginning, Jesus already existed. Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. And he existed in the beginning with God. And God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. Jesus gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The darkness can never extinguish it. And so this idea, in the beginning, Jesus already existed. And so when we think about Jesus being born, we know that we can trace back and say that it was about 2,000-ish years ago. But the idea that we need to try to wrap our heads around tonight is that Jesus was always there. And that when John uses the word beginning, in the beginning, it's in the same context that you see in the very first book and chapter and verse in the Bible, that in the beginning, right? In Genesis, in the beginning. And that beginning is different than what we think about the beginning. Because if I said the beginning of this service, then we're talking about 6:30 or so. If I'm talking about the beginning of this month, you're talking about December 1st, whatever day of the week that fell on. If you're thinking about the beginning of this year, you can say January 1st, 2013. But when we say in the beginning, the context of God, you can't put your finger on when that was. In fact, the beginning can be translated best into a beginningless start. A beginningless start, which is, again, big stuff, hard to wrap your mind around. I'm not trying to give you a headache on Christmas Eve, but the beginningless start. Beginningless start. That Jesus was always there, and that 2,000 years or so ago that he was born on the earth was just the time that God chose to send himself in the form of Jesus into our world. Into our world. But he was always there. And that he came that he might bring light to the darkness. That he might bring light to the darkness. And Jesus had a cousin, and his name was John. And they call him John the Baptist. It's a different John, and it's confusing. This John wrote the book of John, but this is another John, okay? But John the Baptist, they call him that because he liked to baptize people, okay? And so, I guess if I was living 2,000 years ago, I'd be Scott the preacher. I don't know. Or you'd be, Joe the cement truck driver. Whatever you do, but this was John the Baptist because he baptized. And he was Jesus' cousin, and his purpose on earth, the reason he was called, was to tell people that Jesus, the Messiah, that God was coming. So let's look at that. John 1, 6 through 14. John 1, 6 through 14. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He, Jesus, came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him, but to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. So the Word became human and made his home among us. Or another way to say that, so Jesus became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. And when John says, this is Jesus' friend, not his cousin, but when John says that we have seen him and we have seen his glory, he literally means he has seen him. Because he was alive when Jesus was alive. And not just was he alive when Jesus was alive, but when Jesus died, and if we hold to the faith that Jesus came back to life, John was there for that part too. And that's why John, with a lot of confidence, could write his memoir or his account of Jesus and his life with Jesus that we read today, a couple thousand years later. And I want to take just a second and think about John the Baptist, about how he wasn't the light, but his job was to tell everyone about the light. But his job was to tell everyone about the light. And so what we know as a church and as individuals and as Christians and believers, we're not the light. We can't save anyone. We can't really fix anyone. We can give some good advice, and we can love, and we can do great things, but we can't change a life. But what we can do is to point to the one who can. We can point to the one who can. And so just as we look at these candles here that are lit this evening, it's not us doing the lighting, right? The candle is lit in and of itself, but we can take the light and we can carry the light and we can pass the light. We can pass the light. It says, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son, but why did he come? Why did he come? So again, Christmas is the idea that Jesus was born in a manger, as we sing about, away in a manger, no crib for his bed. And the idea that he came, we know that. We celebrate little Jesus. We have little nativity scenes, and there's little baby Jesus right there, as a matter of fact. And we know that we get it. We get it. It's a very sweet time. And then you might take it a step further and go, yeah, and then that's the reason that we give presents. We give presents because we want to honor or remember or pay homage to the fact that God gave, and so we give to those. God gave because he loves, and so we give to those that we love. But why? But why did God give? Why did he love, and why did he give what he gave? I want you to think about it maybe a little bit differently than you have in the past, but understand that God, the gift that God gave was not a baby. Baby Jesus is not what God gave, but what God did give was grace wrapped in a baby lying in a manger. God gave not a baby, but God gave grace wrapped up in a baby lying in a manger. Romans 5, 6, and 11 sheds more light on why God gave. And this idea of the time. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who's especially good. So again, just to unpack it a little bit, nobody wants to die for just anybody. If you're like really, really nice guy, really super good, really kind, maybe someone will die for you. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die while we were still sinners. Just confirming the fact that it had nothing to do with us, had nothing to do with our good behavior or bad behavior for that matter. But God didn't do it because of you. He did it because of himself, because he is love. And his gift was not a baby. His gift was grace wrapped in a baby, lying in a manger. And since we have been made right in God's sight by the blood of Christ, he will certainly save us from God's condemnation. For since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his Son, while we were still enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of his Son. So now we can rejoice in our wonderful new relationship with God because our Lord Jesus Christ has made us friends of God. And there's your why. There's your why. Why did the baby come? Because it was the first step that God took towards reconciling man back to himself. Because man throughout centuries and still today, from the dawn of time, rejects God, turns from God, rebels against God. And what God has every right to do is to punish and to pour out wrath. But God is not that kind of God. God is a loving God who loves so much that he gives. For God so loved the world that he gave. He didn't give us a baby. He gave us grace wrapped in a baby, lying in a manger. And so tonight, what I want to encourage you to do and remind us to do is that when we think about baby Jesus, that we can't leave him in the manger. As we sang tonight, this baby son, the government or the world's power falls on the shoulders of this baby son, because Jesus didn't stay in the manger. And we can't accept Christmas with that little cute little baby in the manger, the little nativity scene that you might have in your home tonight. We can't leave him there because he didn't stay there. But what he did do was to grow up a common man, common human being like you and I, began a short ministry of about 3 years, because that's about as much as the world could take until they killed him. And he died for your sins and mine. And that's the other half of Christmas to me. That's the other half of the little baby and the giving and all the stuff. And when I sit back in those moments when wrapping paper's flying in a tizzy, and I think to myself, there must be more, it's because I feel like in my soul that I'm wired for greatness. I'm wired for something more. I'm wired to have, but what I tend to do as a human, what I tend to do is try to find that fulfillment in stuff, in phones and tablets and gadgets and iPads and whatever. And I'm not against that. I'm not against that. But that stuff is just stuff to make me more comfortable. It's not stuff to make me feel fulfilled. It's not stuff to give me identity. It's not stuff to give me joy. And that stuff will never, when life comes to a crashing halt at my front door and I'm met with death or disease or betrayal or hurt, that I won't go, I know what I'll do. Let me get my iPad. That'll fix everything. We need something more than that. We need something deeper than that. I need something more, and I think that you do too. Celebrate the stuff. Celebrate the people that you love. Give them things to remind them and tell them how much you love. But do it in the context of God's gift of grace wrapped in a baby lying in a manger. Because as things change, the more they stay the same. Every human ever born is born with a longing and desire for a deeper, more meaningful connection. And that's found in Jesus. And that's found in Jesus.